All right, so today we're going to dive deep into PHP tools.
Oh, thing.
Yeah, those helpers that can really make a difference, in your coding workflow.
Right, make things smoother and...
Yeah, and more productive and all that good stuff. And speaking of PHP, it's still incredibly popular.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, did you know that it powers like huge websites like Facebook and WordPress?
It's everywhere.
It's kind of amazing when you think about it.
Yeah.
So with so many tools out there for PHP,
right,
we need to figure out like which ones are really worth the time.
Yeah, I know sifting through it all can be a bit overwhelming.
That's why we're doing this deep dive.
Right.
We have some great sources.
Yeah.
And we're going to figure out which tools are like the must-haves.
Absolutely. Yeah, these sources really focus on the tools that are going to be practically useful.
Yes.
For, everyday web development.
Yes, it is.
You're really going to need.
So let's imagine for a minute that our listener is building their PHP toolkit.
Okay. We're going to be their guide.
Let's
to the best options out there.
That's good.
So first things first, like if you're setting up your development environment,
right?
What are some of the tools that come to mind from these sources?
Well, the key CDN source, they highlight some interesting ones.
Okay.
Well, there's the big names, of course.
Yeah.
Like PHPStorm, AWO Cloud 9, XAMPP.
Yeah.
Those are kind of the standard ones you hear a lot.
Ooh, hitty hitters.
Yeah, and they each have their own strengths and maybe some drawbacks too.
Yeah, so let's talk about those for a second. Like, what are the strengths of some of those? Like PHPStorm.
Well, PHPStorm, it's like...
I've heard it called the Cadillac.
Yes. The Cadillac of PHP IDEs.
It's like top of the line.
It is. It's got everything you could possibly want.
All the bells and whistles?
All the bells and whistles, yeah. Intelligent code completion.
Nice.
Database integration. Support for all the popular frameworks.
So if you're working on a huge project.
Large, complex project. PHPStorm's the way to go.
Yeah, it can be a real lifesaver.
But what if I'm like an independent developer, just working on smaller stuff?
Right, yeah, in that case.
PHPStorm might be overkill.
It might be a bit much, yeah.
Yeah.
You might want to look at something a little more lightweight.
What?
Like Sublime Text.
Okay.
Super flexible. You can customize it how you like.
Yeah, I've heard that's a good one.
It is. And it's not going to bog you down with features you don't need.
And probably a bit easier on the wallet too, right?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Especially if you're, an independent developer.
And what about if you want to keep everything in the cloud?
And you've got AWS Cloud 9.
Okay.
No messing around with server setup or anything.
Jump in.
Open your browser, start coding.
That's pretty cool.
It is. It's all about that accessibility, being able to work from anywhere.
Right. Portability.
Portability. Exactly.
The key CDN source, they also mentioned Aptana Studio and Code Lobster.
Yeah, Aptana Studio is open source,
Yeah.
surprisingly powerful. And Code Lobster, that's one that's often used as a plugin for, content management systems and things like that.
Okay, so it seems like there are a lot of options.
There are.
For setting up your PHP development environment.
There are.
Mm-hmm.
But, it's important to choose the right tool for the job.
Right.
Think about the scope of your project, how big your team is.
Right.
And even your personal coding style.
Like what you're comfortable with.
Yeah, what you're comfortable with, exactly. Okay, so we've talked about setting up our development environment.
We've got our IDE, we're ready to code.
Right, but there's more.
Before we get too far ahead of ourselves,
yes,
we need to talk about security.
Oh yeah, security is huge.
It's crucial, right? We don't want to...
You don't want to leave your app vulnerable?
No.
So our key CDN source, they talk about RIPS.
RIPS, okay.
Yeah. And it's actually kind of interesting. It started as an open source tool, but it's evolved into more of a premium service.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's like having a dedicated security team constantly watching your code.
Okay, that makes sense.
Looking for those weaknesses before the hackers do.
No, it's not just about tools, though, right?
Right.
It's about having that security mindset.
Absolutely, from the very beginning.
So, like, thinking like a hacker.
Yeah, exactly. Trying to anticipate...
What could go wrong?
What could go wrong, right? Like, for example,
yeah,
SQL injection. That's a classic one.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that.
Where they try to insert malicious code into your database.
That sounds scary.
It can be. So you got to use things like prepared statements.
Prepared statements. So that's like a...
It helps separate your code from the data.
So it's like a filter.
Yeah, like a security checkpoint.
Keeping the bad stuff out.
Exactly.
Okay, what about cross-site scripting?
Oh, XSS.
Yeah, is that a big one?
Yeah, that one's where they inject malicious scripts into your website.
Oh, so it runs on the visitor's browser.
Right. Potentially hijacking their session.
So how do we prevent that?
Sanitize user input
Sanitize.
Okay, basically you filter any data that comes from the user.
Get rid of anything suspicious.
Exactly. Any characters that could be harmful.
Okay, so we've got SQL injection, XSS, any other security tips, like in general?
Well, keeping your PHP version up to date.
Oh, right. Updates.
Super important. Same with all your dependencies.
Dependencies, yeah.
Make sure you're always running the latest security patches.
Makes sense. So it's like,
like having the latest antivirus.
Right. You got to stay on top of it.
And of course, strong passwords, proper authentication.
Those are the basics.
Yeah, but you'd be surprised how many people overlook them.
So security is really an ongoing thing.
It's a process, not a one-time fix.
Okay, so our app is secure. It's well-tested.
We're making progress.
But before we launch it into the world,
yes,
there's one more thing.
Performance.
Right. Gotta make sure it's fast.
Because what good is a secure app if it takes forever to load?
Exactly. Nobody's got time for that.
Nope.
So what do our sources say about performance optimization?
Well, KeyCDN mentions Retrace.
Retrace. I think I saw that in the Medium article, too.
You did.
So it must be important.
It is. It's not just for performance monitoring.
Oh.
It can help you track errors, too.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and identify bottlenecks in your code.
So it's like a code profiler, kind of?
Yeah, kind of. It helps you see where things are slowing down.
Nice.
And New Relic APM, that's another popular one.
New Relic, okay.
It gives you a really comprehensive overview of your app's performance.
So like
response times, database queries, user interactions, all that.
So I could see if like a specific database query is taking too long.
Exactly.
And then try to optimize it.
And New Relic can even suggest solutions.
Oh, that's cool.
So it's not just showing you the problems, it's helping you fix them.
And I see Apoptics here too.
Apoptics is great for integrations.
Okay.
And custom metrics.
Custom metrics. So like if I want to track something specific, that's not a standard metric.
Right.
Then Apoptics can handle that.
Yeah, it gives you a lot of flexibility. And then there's AppDynamics.
Ah, yes. AppDynamics, that's the big one.
The big one.
The enterprise level tool. Tons of features.
It's probably pricey.
Oh, yeah. It comes with a hefty price tag.
So I guess it depends on the scale of your project.
Right. If you're running a massive application.
Yeah, AppDynamics might be worth it.
But for smaller projects.
Maybe stick with Retrace or New Relic.
Exactly. Find the tool that fits your needs.
Okay, so we've talked about optimizing performance. And I want to go back to something we mentioned earlier.
What's that?
Automation.
Ah, yes. Automation. It's everywhere.
It seems like all these tools have some element of automation.
They do, and that's not by accident.
So it's like a philosophy.
It is. Automate as much as you can.
So you can focus on the important stuff.
The creative stuff, the problem solving.
We've seen it in testing.
With PHP Unit and Selenium.
And documentation.
PHP Documenter, PHP Docs.
And performance monitoring.
There, Retrace, New Relic.
What other areas can we automate?
Well, deployment is the big one. Deployment, right? Getting your code to the server.
Yeah, that can be a real pain if you do it manually.
Uploading files, configuring everything.
So many steps, so many chances for errors.
So we need to automate that.
Our Medium source talks about Deployer.
Deployer, okay.
It's specifically designed for automating PHP deployments.
So it's like having a robot do all the hard work.
Basically, it handles all the complex tasks.
So you don't have to.
Exactly. Less time, less errors, more peace of mind.
Okay, Deployer. I'm adding that to my list.
Good choice.
And along with automation, there's another theme that keeps coming up.
Code quality.
Right, writing good code.
Not just code that works.
But code that's easy to read and maintain.
Exactly. Code that other developers can understand.
And that's where PHPStan comes in.
Yes, PHPStan, our code analysis buddy.
It's like having a code stylist.
I like that.
Making sure everything is neat and tidy.
Following the best practices.
So it helps prevent bugs.
It does, but it also makes your code more readable.
Easier to work with.
Which ultimately leads to a better project.
Okay, so automation and code quality.
Two key concepts
to keep in mind
as we build our PHP applications.
Anything else we should add to our developer toolkit?
Well, there's one more ingredient that's often overlooked.
What's that?
Community.
Community?
Yeah, connecting with other developers.
Oh, right, like PHPFI?
Exactly. PHPFI is a great example.
Developers coming together.
To establish standards.
Yeah, best practices.
So we can all work together more effectively.
And there's a whole online community too, right?
Oh, yeah. Forums, social media, meetups.
So many ways to connect.
Share knowledge, get help, find inspiration.
That's awesome.
It is. It's a reminder that we're not alone in this.
We're all in this together.
Exactly.
Okay, so we're back.
Back for round 3.
The final part of our deep dive into PHP tools.
It's been a journey, hasn't it?
It has. We've covered a lot of ground.
We have, from development environments all the way to performance and security.
And even that idea of community.
Yeah, I think that's so important.
It is. I mean, it's easy to forget.
Yeah, especially when your head's down in the code.
Right, that there are other people out there.
Yeah, struggling with the same things, sharing the same passion.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what are some key takeaways?
Well, one thing that really stands out to me is that building a PHP application, it's not just about the code itself.
Right.
It's about having the right tools, the right mindset.
The whole package.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a craftsman. They don't just need the raw material.
They need the right tools for the job.
Right. The tools, the skills, the knowledge.
So if our listeners are about to start their own PHP project, what are some of the essentials? Where do they begin?
Well, first things first, they got to set up their development environment.
Right. Their coding workspace.
We talked about PHPStorm.
Sublime Text.
Right. Those are good options.
PHPStorm for the big projects.
Yeah, lots of features, great for frameworks.
And Sublime Text for something a bit more lightweight.
Yeah, more flexible, customizable.
And if they want to go the cloud route,
there's always AWS Cloud9.
So many options.
It's all about finding what works best for you.
Okay, so development environments set up. What's next?
Testing. Got to make sure that code actually works.
Right, and we can't emphasize that enough.
Testing is not optional.
Unit testing, UI testing.
PHP unit for those unit tests.
Selenium for UI.
Those are your go-to tools.
And of course, debugging goes hand in hand with testing.
When those bugs inevitably pop up.
Xdebug, debug bar.
Those will help you track down the culprits.
And we talked about documentation, too.
Documentation, a gift to your future self.
Or anyone else who has to work on your code.
PHP Documenter, PHP Docs. Great tools for that.
Make sure your code is well documented.
It'll save you so much headache down the road.
And then security, that's a big one.
Huge. You got to protect your application.
RIPS, that was an interesting tool.
Yeah, and remember, it's not just about tools.
Right.
It's about that security mindset.
Sanitizing inputs, using prepared statements, keeping everything updated.
Those are all best practices.
And then performance. Got to make sure our app is fast.
Nobody wants to wait around for a slow website.
Retrace, New Relic, AppDynamics, AppDynamics.
Those can help you pinpoint bottlenecks and optimize your code.
So many great tools out there.
It's exciting.
And as we looked at all these tools, I noticed a couple of recurring themes.
Like?
Automation.
Yes, automation.
Automating those repetitive tasks.
So you can focus on the more creative stuff.
We saw it in testing, deployment, documentation.
Even performance monitoring.
And then there was code quality.
Right. Writing clean, maintainable code.
PHPStan can help with that.
Make sure your code is following the best practices.
And of course, we talked about the importance of community.
Connecting with other PHP developers.
Sharing knowledge, getting help, finding inspiration. It's been quite a journey.
It has.
But I think we've equipped our listener with a pretty solid toolkit.
A good starting point for sure.
So as you embark on your own PHP adventures,
remember to keep learning, keep experimenting.
Don't be afraid to try new things.
And don't forget about that community.
We're there to support you.
Happy coding, everyone.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into PHP tools.